Thank you. Hi, everybody. Absolutely wonderful to be here today. So thank you so much for having us here to discuss art as activism. We're going to discuss and explore how storytelling in all its forms can challenge power, spark empathy, and mobilise action to end violence against women and girls. Through film, audio, and storytelling, today's panellists use narrative to make the invisible visible, shining a light on topics and stories that might otherwise go untold. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our brilliant panellists here today. Next to me is Anna Sinfield. She's the award-winning journalist and creator of the global hit podcast, The Girlfriends, and is known for her emotionally resonant storytelling and commitment to elevating women's voices. Then we have Johanna von Fischer. She's the co-founding director of 16 Days, 16 Films, a short film initiative that amplifies female filmmakers and drives social change on gender-based violence. Please put your hands together for our panellists. If I can start by saying thank you both for the amazing work that you do. On behalf of everyone in the room, the platforms that you put forward to allow women to have voices, especially those that may not previously have been heard, is quite outstanding. So thank you both very much.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to come to the first question, if I may. And Anna, I'm going to direct this at you. Are you sat comfortably?
I am.
OK, then let's begin. And of course, there's water available if you'd like it. So Anna, across your career, and now as host of The Girlfriends, you've shared powerful, emotional stories of women seeking truth and justice. What does it mean to you to use your platform to tell these stories? And how do you approach the responsibility of representing those that entrust you with their experiences?
Well.
It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Any, do say.
I mean, it means everything to me. Obviously, I work at the intersection between journalism and entertainment. And so it means I'm always working with real stories, real people who have been through real stuff. But I'm also in this kind of great position where I get to make it into something that people actually want to listen to. Mm. And that's something that's really hard for, I'm sure, everyone in this room who's involved in trying to kind of raise awareness about kind of really big, important topics. But sometimes it's too scary and hard to digest. And I, as a storyteller, get to kind of figure out how to frame it in a way that people want to engage with and therefore raise awareness kind of by proxy, right? And then I think the second part of your question...
It was about the trust, really, because some of these stories, they're all very deeply personal and difficult stories. So it's about how you work with the people that feature on your podcast and build their trust to allow you to tell their story with them.
Yeah, and I take that responsibility really seriously. It's amazing how many people are willing to talk to me about their stories. I'm a journalist. I would not talk to anyone about my life. And so the fact that these people who have been through much worse things than me are actually willing to kind of open up and sit with me for so long means that I have to repay that trust that they've given to me. So I try and sometimes break little journalistic rules, like afterwards if they want to message me and say, hey, actually that thing felt really exposing that I spoke to you about in the moment because we've kind of felt like friends, I'll be like, cool, let's cut it out. And so I try and make sure that people feel loved and cared for in the process while they're giving me so much. Because let's face it, it's an exchange. I then go and make a sellable product with it. Let's try and make sure that we're doing good for each other.
I think that really comes across in the podcast as well, is that you have a natural, very natural style and a warmth, and that's got to help when dealing with such difficult subject matter.
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it definitely shows. And one of the things that I was really struck by listening to the podcast is there's also lightness to when you're discussing such dark subject matter that really makes it very impactful and very human.
Yeah, and I mean, that's at the core of my ethos, that sometimes when we hear these stories about survivors, they become these one-dimensional beings who end up just being someone who's defined by their suffering, but defined by their victimhood. And that's, obviously it's a defining thing that you go through. But, usually they've had lives before and they have lives after, hopefully. And I want to make sure that I'm kind of introduce them as the women that they are. You know, they are fully fledged, interesting, dynamic, multi-dimensional human beings, and those are the women that I get to know, and so I want the listeners to get to know them as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna. Johanna, if I can come to you with a question. Through 16 days, 16 films, you've created a platform for artists confronting gender-based violence through short film. What inspired you to build this initiative, and how do you see the role of filmmakers in influencing public understanding and empathy?
So I'm going to give you a short answer, because there's actually a very long answer to that. But for us, Gint and I, who's my co-founder, who is here, we were working in distribution and were particularly interested in telling female stories, and through that came across some stories where we began working with UK Says No More. And we just really felt like we needed to do more, that this was the conversations we were having around these stories, and the ability to highlight particularly female filmmakers felt really important to us. So we started to look at a way to do this over the 16 days of activism. We couldn't do feature films, because to ask people to sit and watch 16 feature films over 16 days is probably going to be a little difficult, and choosing them would be a little difficult. And it also just felt like a really powerful way to reach audiences, because you can highlight, I mean, we've learned so much. We've learned all the varying ways that violence begins. So when I started this journey, I didn't really understand a lot of the things that had happened to me, and that they were actually, microaggressions or things that I shouldn't be just going, oh yeah, that's nice, and that beginning is the beginning of allowing someone to think of anyone as less than, and if you think of someone as less than, it's much easier to be violent towards them. So our platform allows stories from across the kind of remit of, gender-based violence. So we have period poverty, we have gender pay gap, but we also have some really tough stories around domestic violence, sexual violence. And I guess it's just in a short way, it's where way of saying it, it's where activism meets storytelling, meets gender-based violence, and different people are going to be affected by different stories. So we have 16 stories, and some of those stories are humorous, funny, they make us laugh, and through that laughter we suddenly see how absurd all this is. Or they might be abstract, but something in the abstract really just grabs you and you realize what this is really about, and this is something that we all go through. But the other thing is I think it's that shared experience. There was a filmmaker that we were interviewing the other day, and she was saying that she was writing her own story and wanted to talk to other women, girls who had gone through similar things. And part of her was thinking, nobody will have ever gone through this specific thing. And then once she started hearing these other women and girls, she realized this happens everywhere. This crazy stuff is happening, and it's not just me, and I actually have a right to say no, and to show other people that they have a right to say no, and that this is happening to other people. I think one of the big things that the big message that No More puts out is you are not alone. And I think that's what a lot of this is about, these stories, is to say you are not alone.
I think, and thank you, I think it's really interesting you touched upon something there, just in terms of the nuanced details that I experienced in both your art forms. and how that makes something come alive that perhaps a report might not do so, or a news feature might not. It makes the stories very human. And I think I've seen the level of detail in the films that come to 16 Days, 60 Films, and in the podcast that you host as well. Do you think that's kind of why these particular forms, film, podcast, really does help activism when it comes to the cause?
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes these stories accessible, like I said earlier, to a normal story-loving audience, and we all love to consume stories and watch Netflix series about gruesome things that we hope don't happen in our lives, but it kind of makes you in touch with it, and when you realise it's real, that might make you want to engage either as an activist and kind of help the cause, or also, one of the amazing things, the way I first got involved in No More, is that we got No More to support our first podcast as it went out. And the reason I wanted to do it wasn't really, love No More, but it wasn't really to boost up your profile. It was more about creating a place where our listeners, if they were affected by the story, could actually go and have support, because the media tends to leave them in the wild a little bit. Yeah. And when we kind of did that, I remember the stats when it first came out, we don't know the final number, but the recorded one was 1,200 people reached out to the No More click-through page for the girlfriends for support. Yeah. I mean, that's just mega. Yeah. And half the time the testimonials were not kind of reaching out to say, I now want to fight for the cause of violence against women, but saying, oh, this made me think about my sister and her relationship, and something's just not right, and maybe I want help. Or actually, I'm starting to think that this might be something I'm going through, and looking for that support and companionship. And I don't know if a news article or a campaign that's not attached to something so kind of easily consumable can do that.
And one of the important things is that that I always think, because I'm not a stats person, I'll look at stats and I'll think, I don't know what that means really, is stats do help change policy, and that helps change structures. But stories change people. Yeah. And different stories will have different effects. So something that grabs me might not grab a friend, but then suddenly they'll watch something and they've never really thought about it. Yeah. And I mean, I think I've told you this story before, but I got messaged by someone who was an accountant who had seen a film about period poverty, and it was about period poverty in this country. And he had no idea. He just was like, I don't have a daughter. I didn't know this was an issue. I have a son. I made him watch it. I made my whole office watch it. And he said, and one of the beautiful things about this film, it's called Absent, is that there's a boy in it. And he goes and he takes care of her rather than laughing at her or doing all the things that we kind of expect. And he said, I want my son to be that boy. Yeah. And that's the thing, is who you're going to affect and what film is going to affect them, and then change not only their life, but their son's life. It's exciting, and it's exciting just with one person. Yeah, we do it for that one person.
Totally. Yeah, and it's lovely because it does lead me on to this other question I wanted to ask you guys, which is, in your views, why creative storytelling is so vital to the movement to end violence against women and girls, and what can art offer that policy or advocacy alone cannot? And I think that some of the things you're saying about it, the stories become very real. People understand them, they identify with them, and become much more alive. So I think it's a credit to you that the work that you do showcases these stories. And on that note, in terms of, there must be so many stories that you come across. How do you, because every one of them is important. So I'm really interested to know, how do you choose the stories that the films, the stories that you work with?
Well, you've been going through this very recently, haven't you? Your 16 films.
It's painful. It's one of the most painful things we have to do. We get hundreds of films each year, and they all are important to someone. And so we actually have a team. It's not just me and Ginta. We have a team of about 40, 50 people. And in fact, some of the people from No More watch. And we have people from the film industry watching as well. So it's activists and film industry. And it really just, have conversations throughout. We keep those conversations open because, No More really is important to us because there are things that maybe we don't understand, ways of telling stories that actually might be problematic, or also having a cross-section across cultures and countries because we're international now. It's really important that we have different people putting their point of view, and so we have an open discussion on our film site with the people who are watching. And then it hurts because there are always films that we fall in love with that won't, because there's only 16 places. And it's impossible, and we want to show them all.
Sure. Thank you so much. And Anna, from your perspective as well, I'm just conscious of time, but in terms of choosing those stories.
Yeah, so I mean, there's the practical answer in that we want to create varied storytelling. And I have this kind of slogan, which is a little bit trite, but we live by it, which is the Girlfriends has to tell stories of women winning. Often there is a woman who loses out in some capacity in our story, but like they don't have to be total losers. I want people to come out of our stories of the podcast as women listeners and go, oh, life is worth living in some capacity. Oh, great, isn't female friendship brilliant? So I want people to leave with a bit of joy. And then also, I guess I want to make sure, I'm always so conscious I don't want to create a homogeneity of women's experiences.
Of course.
There are so many different experiences that happen in different cultures, different groups, blah, blah, and I want to make sure that we represent everybody. So each season I try and diversify that.
Amazing. And I'm so glad you mentioned about the positivity and the hope, because it's so important, isn't it, that we have that feeling. And I love the fact that it says women winning, which is a brilliant slogan, absolutely brilliant. So we've got literally a few minutes left, but I did want to fire one final question at you both. And if we can keep it tight, that would be amazing. What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who hopes to use their creative medium to inspire change?
I would say believe in your story, tell your story, and don't let anyone tell you that your story isn't valuable and worth it. And it is a fight, but these stories really matter, and if it matters to you, it matters to other people. And it needs to be told. Thank you very much.
And I think maybe I'll tell the other side of that story, which your version, I think, is as if you're the person who is experiencing something and you want to get that message out. But as a producer who has had a lovely life, I often am telling stories about other people's experiences. And so I would say, let them lead the message, let them lead what change they want to see, and be the conduit. Use your craft to do that the best way you possibly can. And that's the best allyship that you can offer.
Thank you so much. Gosh, we could talk for a lot longer. It's an absolutely fascinating discussion. So thank you both for all the work that you do on behalf of myself, the audience, and No More. Thanks for a great chat. And if I can quickly end with just a shout out really for the fundraising event that No More has going on. If you are able to donate, whether you're in the room or joining us online, No More's Elimination of Violence Against Women Day Relief Fund. The link to that donation link could be found at www.nomore.org, and these funds will be going towards organisations whose work has been negatively impacted by the cuts, allowing them to continue doing the important work that they're doing. So thank you so much for your time today, and take care. Thank you.